So good morning, everybody. Thank you for attending today. Today we're going to be talking about my work and uncovering all of the details and pieces to my work. So let's get started. So again, first thing we want to do is talk about our next training, just so it's on our books. June 23rd, we will be talking about Act 51 in MERS. Paul will be doing that presentation. I might step in for one or two little comments, but for the most part, Paul will be there on that. All right, so let's jump into my work. So let's talk a little bit about the whole under the hood, looking at what all is happening when you're doing my work connections and parts. So we're going to start out here in this first top diagram. And if we look at the user device, that's going to be, this will be your cell phone, your desktop, whatever it is that's getting to the MyWork website. And the reason I want to talk about this is I want to talk about performance and bandwidth and when things aren't working for login and things like that. So you have an understanding of all the pieces that kind of fit together for it. But so essentially the user comes in, he goes to the he goes to mywork.kitestateinc.com. We get the login page. So that takes them on the internet all the way through to the MyWork website. The MyWork website then asks him for his username and password. So he puts in the cog to get his tenant and he puts in his password. That makes a connection then to your backend server that we have running with the portal. We then gather from that server, we say, is this person a valid MyWork person to be using your uh, current backend? And if it's permitted, that happens. So there's basically a link between the user comes in, he has an ISP link here, which might be the same as the current link you have in your, might be like a desktop in the Road Commission. Um, then you have the MyWork website that's hosted by us, and then you have the portal that's the backend server that's usually tied to your server, but it could also make some kind of a network connection to a different server that's your SQL database. But most of you have the portal on the same device so as to eliminate any time lag or delay we would have connecting to the SQL database. So that being said, the understanding here is that this connection here between the device and the initial website is where you're traveling and you end up doing a very lightweight, small amount of data gets moved between these two. So this is just the screens that you see on your thing on the website. This is just the data that you're inputting, which is very minimal as far as a time card goes. A lot of things like that it's just a small amount of data. The part that gets to be a lot of data is this right here, the connection when MyWork has to go and get different things. So again, if we're looking at what's known on the internet as bandwidth, when you get your ISP connection, you got, maybe a bandwidth of, 100 megabits down and 100 megabits up, or it was usually it's diverse, so you get a bigger download rate than upload rate. But again, the idea here is you've got a certain amount, which is, the best way to think of that is it's like lanes on a highway. So when you get your ISP and you get, let's just say 40 megabits up, 40 megabits down, you have, I'm just going to put this into ideas so that you can kind of understand how performance works on the internet. You bought enough bandwidth for, let's say, 4 lanes of a highway. Now, if you've got a lot of activity at your road commission on the internet, for instance, you have your voice over IP is on your internet connection. You have somebody who might be, streaming Pandora or the other one, but basically that, or there's got somebody doing a lot of AI work, sending data back and forth on their AI. Those are all consuming a lane on the highway. And just like highways, if I have, 4 lanes and I have 3 cars, those 3 cars aren't going any faster than their maximum speed, which let's just, for sake of circumstances, say it's 70 miles an hour. Same thing with the internet. You're not going to go any faster. If you were to change your internet rate from, 40 megabytes to 4,000, it wouldn't go any faster because the speed of any given connection and data transmission is defined by that. But it means that you won't get interrupted. So, for instance, if it was a one-lane highway and you had to have four cars on the one-lane highway, you're only getting one-fourth of the data through because each car, given being a piece of data, doesn't travel. They're all traveling at the same time on the road, so you're not getting as much data through. So you're really buying volume of data, not necessarily a speed when you're buying your internet connection. So that being said, you want to make sure that you're not overloading that volume, thus reducing the speed on your end of the connection. And why this is important? It's important because when MyWork tries to reach down at this section here to grab the data from your backend server to your portal, when we try to do that, this is where we have, you know, problems with delays and things like that. Because right now the thing is it's using the up speed to get the data back, which is going to be usually your slower speed. So I'm asking for, our website is asking for things that actually could be quite large. Like we ask for all of your inventory items, and we ask for all of your equipment. Those are fairly large tables of data that we have to pull across when somebody logs in. So just so you understand, generally your ISPs are maybe 100, 200. We have a minimum on our website of 2,000 megabytes because we serve everybody. But generally it runs around 4,000 to 5,000 megabytes when it's idle. And then it can ramp up if it's detected that it's starving, they will charge us a little bit, but it's not a big deal. It'll ramp up to a 10,000 megabytes per second. So we definitely have enough space and things at the MyWork website to service everybody. But again, our biggest issue that we've been having has been that connection between the website and your backend portal where we get the biggest thing. So we want to make sure that you guys are maintaining your bandwidth. Streaming is one thing that can consume bandwidth on your side. And if you don't have a lot to begin with and you're sharing it a lot, other things that, like Samsara has a huge, if you're doing the monitoring on Samsara, that's a huge hog of bandwidth that slows it just basically consumes half or three-quarters of your internet. So when they're trying to do a, MyWork login or something, you are going to get throttled at your side. The other thing is a lot of places will say, are you working? If you can see our website, we're working. We don't have any part to our website. If you can go on your phone and log into, mywork.collegedating.com, not necessarily log into your account, but actually just get to the website and see it, we're up and running. There isn't anything that would stop. Well, if you don't, if you go there and you don't see the website, that's one thing. But if you go there and you see the login screen, then we are up and running. There isn't anything that stops us at that point. The biggest thing that might stop us is we cannot somehow get a connection to your backend portal for a whole slew of reasons. But when it's really slow or somebody says it's really slow, I have to, we have to then dig into what's going on your network. Because again, we have plenty of bandwidth at the MyWork site. I made sure of that when we, signed up with UBX Cloud to host it. We wanted to make sure that we paid for the minimum of 2,000 and that will scale all the way up to 10,000. So again, the highest we've had to go on was one point we had to go to 4,800 when we had 35 people on at one time. So it's not like we have plenty of space, we have plenty of bandwidth out there. We're never going to go, we should never run out on our side of it. But again, the main thing here is we want to make sure that your back end doesn't get overloaded just by things you may not be aware of that's happening at your road commission. Could just be a guy out in the back. It could be VPN connections. We've had a issue with somebody that as soon as somebody signed on their VPN to do a remote from home work, it just hogged out their whole server because there was a bug in their VPN that was causing, the thing to repeat every packet or every piece of data that was going through. So again, just a lot of things happen. I just make sure that you have enough bandwidth at your road commission to deal with this. And if you don't, then make sure that you are not consuming it with things that are not necessarily important to the road commission, like, streaming music or videos or things like that might not be, advantageous. So just pay attention to it. It's something to think about as you're going through. I wanted to make you aware, though, how all these pieces work together. Mainly, this connection here is the one that's the most fragile of them all. Like I said, it has been the cause of most of our, when somebody's got, like I said, performance issues or it doesn't connect or the login isn't working, it's always something to do with this link here in the process. Okay, so let's talk about how much data we bring over and what kind of data and when does this data happen. So when a user comes in and does a login to MyWork, we gather a lot of information from your database, again, via that portal connection part of it. We do grab some things that come right directly from your browser. So if they are using some kind of a third-party browser that isn't, up to speed, up to date with the current internal readings, sometimes we have a fault. So like if they're using an iPhone 4, yeah, I don't think the browser on the iPhone 4 is going to operate correctly with our thing. But then again, if they're using an iPhone 4, they probably ought to get a new iPhone, that kind of a thing. But basically, we grab GPS coordinates and then we grab what time zone. So it's not like we grid a whole lot of data, but the functionality of grabbing that data from a browser and getting the proper response from different browsers, it's important to understand. We've tested with Edge, Chrome, Firefox, a lot of other ones as well. So it works fine with the Apple one, Safari, for the latest version of Safari. But just so you understand, we do grab some data directly from your browser that they logged into our website with. And then we get right during the login, when they type in their part, we go off and we grab some system settings. I'm going to talk about what those are and what they do. And then we grab users' basic employee data, his password and things like that, so we can compare. Actually, we don't ever send the password, we just send a hash, which is just a calculated value based on what his password was. Um, but so we send all that information all the way from the portal into the website for us to use there. Then once he logs in, you get your first screen, which again, we go back to the portal to see, okay, we need to get the status of all of his time cards. If he's an administrator, we have to get the status of all of his direct people that he's administrator for and bring that as well for that first screen. Then if he presses, and again, F5 is a refresh, so we grab all this data on a refresh, but if he goes into clock or if he goes into any of the other functionalities, view payroll, banks, things like that, we then gather. At that point, we read all the templates in the system. We read all the payroll types, all the job types, all inventory, all equipment, all bank types, and all the employee permission settings that this employee has, and we bring that over. And then, of course, if he's an administrator or supervisor and he's going to go into approve, we have to bring in all the information, all the time card information for all of his employees that he is approving at that point. So again, you can see that there is a lot of data that has to come through for this to operate smoothly, and we want to make sure that the bandwidth isn't a big consideration when we go to get this information. Now, we have done a lot of work to make this to be compressed and small and tiny. So, it's not like this is 2 gig of data that comes across. It's really a lot smaller than that. But even with the being small, we still have places that have issues. When we do the login and go to places, they sit with the spinner for a very long time. And that spinner for a very long time is most often is because of the connection between our website and your portal not having enough lanes in the highway to send the data across. So I talked about system settings in our previous screen. So let's look at what the MyWork system settings that we currently have to date are and just discuss those a little bit. The first one is authorization zones for MyWork. Now, what authorization zones were a way to limit whether they could do clock in and clock out based on GPS location of the device they were using to log in with, so cell phone or desktop. I'm going to skip down to what we call the authorized IP addresses. This also is a way that if for instance, it's a desktop which doesn't really have GPS, uh, you would have an IP address that desktop uses, which is often the same IP address that we're connecting to, but may not necessarily be that. So you could specify the public or the internet IP address of that computer to say this is an authorized IP address. And so when we get the request to go to the time clock to punch in something, we can look to see who's connected on what IP address and say, oh, this person's IP address matches an authorized IP address. So we don't have to look at the GPS number. We still gather it, whatever it is, and we write it out. But we authorized it because your IP address was already authorized in here. So this is kind of a way that makes it easier for, one place. The other thing you should note is when we set up our communication to your portal, we had created what's called a tenant, and that's your 3-character or 2-character login at the beginning where you say, for us it's COG, for you it might be, DEL or um, JCRC or whatever it might be for a login for a prefix before that thing. That's where we go off and get the registered IP address, and we also include that registered IP address as an authorized IP address, just because we had some other issues with a couple of things. Just be aware. So that takes care of authorization zones. And then one other part with authorization zones is the second one where we require a time card. So some places didn't want them to be able to even enter or look at a time card unless they're in the authorization zones for MyWork. But again, we don't, most places don't. If, usually they just want only for the clock in, clock out, because it really isn't, why do you want to restrict where the person can enter his time card? Again, so it's just, if there's rules or regulations, wrapped around it, that's fine. But we have the option here. The next one is allow negative inventory on MyWork. What this is, this says I can use more inventory than is available on hand that we've calculated. So some places, needed to be able to say, hey, we haven't really received that inventory yet, so we want to allow them to, say I used, a certain amount of yardage of gravel or cold patch, even though the current inventory system doesn't have enough cold patch on hand to support that. So you can turn that on, or you can leave it off. I just want to make you aware of what that is and what it does. And then the next one, this allows, inventory amounts to be entered as a negative number on time card attachments. Now, we highly discourage the negative amounts, but okay, if you have to somehow say I use -3, yards of something, it's okay, but it becomes a really strange option when you look at some of the reports that see a negative amount of a time cut, for inventory code. But we had a place that had a valid reason for it, so we have the option to turn it on. We would rather not have it on. You really have to think hard about whether you needed it or not, but if you do. So the next column over here on the this area over here, some of these are for future use, some of these are used now. So like the view pay stubs, that's coming. We're still working on some internal issues of why it's not working right. We have the view W4s and the submit W4s. That's also being thought about. We haven't really done a lot of work on that yet. One of the things we're looking at doing is, online signatures and things like that. So again, it's coming. We wanted to have it here, so it was part of the listing of things. The one that is here, though, is the view W2. And what that allows you to do is it just turns on the whole view W2 on MyWork. If you don't have it checked, then the employees don't even see the view W2s on their menu items. But if you do have it checked, then we allow you to do it. And then we also give you a place to put in the latest year that your W2s are available. And the reason we did that is a lot of times you're still, perfecting, and you're going to recalculate the W2s, 3 or 4 more times before you are finalized with it. So we didn't want the fact that they were calculated already to just show up so the employee could grab one early on. So not until you update the year there will it allow anything after that year to be shown. So like the 2026, you could still have, you could have, half of it done, and then you're still looking at, some other things to get right on the time card, on the W-2s. So again, it's just a way for you to be able to specify which one you want to see. And then finally, we have the allow partial time card import. And what that does is right now during import, if a person's time card has a single rejected or there's one time card entry on a time card that isn't approved yet, we don't let you import any of that time card. If you want to still be able to import a partial time card, then you need to check this option. And then when you go to import, we'll let you import a partial time card into the system. But again, it's, some places are like, no, unless this whole time card is good or bad, we're not going to do any kind of bringing it into ProFund so that we have a partial time card in there that doesn't have all of his hours. All right, so authorization zones. If you did turn on authorization zones, a menu item will show up in your payroll that says authorization zones, funny enough. And what that's doing is this is where you can set up a little box where if they're inside the box, if you say they're allowed to do clock in, clock out, and optionally the enter a time card if that's what so desire. So the one thing that I did note after doing some exhaustive research about um, different devices with GPS, couple things that we need to mention. One, if you try to use the map to get right to the edges of your parking lot or to the edges of your building, that's going to be a problem because a cell phone inside of a building can be off by as much as 60 feet. So if you notice here, you only have on here 241 feet. So technically 120 feet could be misconstrued as that. So they would have to stand in the deep center of your office building in order to use their cell phone. I don't think that's exactly what you want, nor was it, intended. So want to make you aware that a whole slew of things can change how accurate a cell phone's GPS reading will be. Um, Again, most like survey devices have a whole slew of extra logic and components within them to make sure that they're as accurate as possible. Whereas cell phones, they can range. So again, 60 feet was the max. It depended on what version of the cell phones you have and things like that. But just being said, if you're inside, weather can change it. If there's a lightning storm going on, your GPS settings readings can be way off, things like that. If you're inside of a metal building with a metal roof, that's also a good luck to get the right reading out of it. The other one that's interesting that caught some people, if your cell phone is connected to your Wi-Fi, it's actually picking up the GPS of your Wi-Fi. So again, it's just a variety of things like that. You just have to be aware. So we ask that you be a little bit more generous on your square boxes to make sure you allow for more of a 60-foot buffer zone if you want to do it. And you can adjust the numbers too. We added the adjust on this to be able to adjust the numbers if you want to click on that, and then you can just change the 27 to a 28 and you're probably okay. That kind of a thing. But again, make sure that when you get the numbers at the top, you look at your width and height to make sure that if you took 120 away from those width and height in feet, you're not in some kind of a small little triangle that's inside the building and inside of a closet, inside of a uh, area where it's really restricted. So that's just so just kind of letting you know GPS isn't super cracked up. It works great if you're out in an open field and there's nothing around, or you're driving on a highway where there's not a tremendous number of things that can interfere with the GPS signal. But when you're in buildings or sometimes around heavy equipment that's putting out interference, you can get an odd reading from GPS. Okay, so then within our settings, we also have inside of your employee some MyWork employee settings that I want to talk about a little bit. So let's start with the status. The status is something you can set to disabled. if the employee has been terminated or retired and they don't have any more need to log into MyWork. But the understanding here is it will happen automatically sometimes. If he tries to log in 5 times in a row and fails, then we are going to disable his account. And so the status, you'll have to come in here and re-enable him inside of employee maintenance. The just, so that's, here just so you are aware of it. We also have, again, another option to disable an authorization zone. So maybe you have some person that, you're not going to try to GPS lock them, but you're GPS locking everybody else. So you want to exempt them from the GPS locking so you can disable the authorization zones. All that means is that if you are using the authorization zones, you can say, oh, this person doesn't have to obey by that because for whatever reason, I can't come up with a good one, but I'm sure you have that if you are using it. But there is an option to disable it so that when they sign into MyWork, we will not lock them out based on their location. Passcode is a 4-character passcode. We've gone over that from previous, iterations, but understand that this is if they lose their password or they have to reset their password, they're going to need to know this passcode. So a lot of places will set that to the last 4 digits through the social number. That's one option. Another option is you can make that the last 4 digits of their phone number. Just a variety of things like that. Something that they might know, and you can let everybody know that that's what it is so that it isn't easy for people to just guess somebody else's. We do keep track of when the last passcode was last changed or set. So we have a date here for that. And then we have an option to clear their MyWork password. So again, the payroll clerk shouldn't really know what somebody's password is to sign into MyWork, but if they can't remember it, the guy can't just figure it out. They can clear that password so that he can enter a brand new password with his passcode. The clerk can enter any passcode for the employee. So again, given people and we forget things, so sometimes you need to have it. I just want to make you aware that we can do that. You have the ability to do that right now to clear someone's password. Usually what I tell people to do if somebody is being fired or retired, you would set their status to disabled and then clear their password and then set the passcode to something that they would not know what it is. That way there's no way they can get back in and try to, fake it by changing their password. Okay, let's move on. So we talked a little bit about the authorization zones. So let's talk a little bit about clocking in, clocking out, what that does, what that doesn't do. So again, the MyWork clock comes in, and one of the things that it does is it lets you punch in and punch out. It will give you the last status. So sometimes if you forgot to punch out yesterday when you left, it will won't say punch in. It'll force you to punch out and then punch in again. The time itself is captured from the MyWork website. Just so you're aware, we do a daily process on the website to refresh the time from the internet to ensure the time is accurate. All the times that are captured for the clock in, clock out are in coordinated universal time, or it's actually UTC is the abbreviation you'll see for many things. So it will get converted when you see it on your screen to your local time zone. This is one reason why we grab the time zone when you log in, so we can show the proper time on your screen for when you clocked in and when you clocked out. Events, I want to just cover events because it's pretty much straightforward. We've had events in our system for a long time for employee events, but now a supervisor can see all his employees' events if he needs to. You can select the date range to view these events, and you can view an administrator can view his secondary employees as well, so that if an event is required to happen, they can double check. A lot of them, it's either probation is ended or you need to go get what's coming up is what do you explain it? Physical, things like that has to happen. Drug testing, things like that. If you have that put in there that once a year they do drug testing. Employee, when they log in, will only see their own events for that are upcoming so that they see them also on MyWork. Uh, it's really all I have to say about events at the moment. There's some things we're looking at possibly enhancing, but right now, so we don't. Now the MyWork W-2, I'm going to switch over in a minute to show, what we're doing, but one of the things we had to do, for visualing to do that when we worked with the IRS on it is we had to make sure we comply with their regulations of online viewing of W-2. Uh, so, and we also enabled the user so he can download a W-2 as a PDF and he can print right from the website if his website supports printing. Depending on your browser, some do, some don't. So I'm going to go ahead and switch to the MyWork that I have running, which it disappeared on me. Okay. Oh, come on now. I had it. Okay, so I'll go here. MyWork. Okay. So we're going to log in to our supervisor and we're going to pop over to his W-2s real quick. Now he's already done his consent form, but if he hasn't filled out a consent form already, the screen will look like this when he signs into it to start with. And this is all the verbiage we have from Mr. IRS provided. So we took, their documentation directly. And then he has to basically check a box that says that. And then he has to say how he wishes to receive his W-2. If he wants to see it online, he needs to click that, puts his first and last name in and the last four of his social number and hits submit. Now I don't have to do that because I've already done it because I never remember the social number. So when he gets here, you can view, we have 5 years of W-2s for this employee. So let's say he needs to get his 2023 for some reason. So he can load it. And here is his 2023 W-2. This is, we added the print so he can print it right from here to his printer, or he can download it to his PC or if you did this on a cell phone, you can download it to your cell phone, and hand that into any, place that you need to do it right from here. Just to let you know, this is here. This is available if we, as we go forward. Eventually, this will have pay stubs and other things in it, but it's just when, like I said, there's things that come up that make it not so easy to do. But I wanted to show at least the W-2s that are here at this point, and we've got that functioning correctly. So let me go back to PowerPoint. Okay, show banks is another option we have in MyWork so that the employees can see all of their banks and the current status of what's going on. The thing we just added a little bit ago was the year-to-date used and the year-to-date added. And year-to-date, we're considering that from 1/1 of the calendar year to 12/31 of the calendar year for items that don't have a calculated value that's based on anniversary date. If it's anniversary date, then those numbers are for the anniversary date. So again, personal sick time, you know, you can kind of see it. It's pretty straightforward. It's just a way for the employee to see it. The administrator can also see this information when they bring it up when they're approving a time card. We added a button for the supervisor to also be able to see the banks of the employees so that if they're requesting time off, you can check to make sure that they haven't gone over some magical internal number, system that you have that he's aware of, so he can approve or deny a time bank or a time card, sorry, a bank request. Okay, so the next part I'd like to talk about here is what makes up a time card for MyWork. Again, a time card, what we call a time card, is a collection of all the tasks that was performed for a day. So there's task entries. In other words, I did this for 2 hours, I did this for 3 hours, and then I, had, another thing for the remaining portion of the day. Those are all what we call tasks, time card tasks. And a time card is the collection of all that for a given day. So again, there's 5 parts to what a time card task is. It's who did the task, when they did the task, what was the task, where did they do the task, and what did they use when they did the task. So you can kind of see from the slide, the date of the task is just the number of hours and the when, the physical date that they're putting the time card entry in for. The task can be a variety of things. It could be a direct equipment, direct expense, or one of our account ones. Um, and then the where again is sometimes it's going to be whether that's the inventory code or the equipment code that's done for the where, or it's a part of the time card template. And then the what used is the whatever equipment and inventory that they use as part of an attachment. That's what we call attachments for what they used. So I'm going to kind of quickly move on to the next part. So we have six types of tasks that MyWork is currently supports for them to be able to enter to so that it limits how much they have to key in, to get it across so that we can generate a proper uh, payroll post. So we have an account type, which uses the template selections to choose the what and the where for the account number. And ultimately, it boils down to an account number when we import, but for the employee, it's just the template, if that's what they see. Then we have the personal, which is a pay type that actually has a physical account number assigned to it. And so this is the um, kind of the number of hours, and everything is designed off of that, personal type for the when and the where. The only thing that's interesting about personal is it's the only one that allows you to go into the future. So if he's going to put in his, my vacation time into the future, or there's jury duty coming up that he's going to be gone for the future, he can put those in before they happen, so that if he's not in the facilities, if he's not available to put it in, it will still can get entered in the future. Direct inventory. This is if you're going to do labor, usually labor to a pit, or something like that, where you're increasing the value of the material that's there because you're doing labor to it. So again, we use the inventory code as the what, and the where, and then if he happens to use them, if he's doing like smoothing a pit and he's using equipment, then that also can be added on to a direct inventory. Direct equipment is similar to direct inventory. You select the piece of equipment as you're doing a direct equipment, and we put the labor directly to that equipment cost. And again, if he uses additional equipment to do that, we do the same thing. Work order, again, if you're using our work order preventive maintenance system, the work order then will give him the option to select any open work order number. And it says line, but it should say in task, because that's what the new work order is going to be, task. So any line number and task that he's putting his labor towards on the work order. And then we also have equipment capital outlay that uses the equipment number as the what. So it's very much like direct equipment, but it operates correctly using your equipment capital outlay definitions that you have in your system. Templates. What I want to do is I want to take a 2-minute break to say I want, up to this point, any questions you would have that's been burning that you really want to hit, let's go ahead and put those in the chat so I can answer those. I'm going to take a little drink here for a minute. It's been 40 minutes we've been in here. So let's keep going on this. And then I've got this is going to go a little bit later than 12. So if you have to go ahead, we are recording it. You can come back to it and do that. So I'm going to give a minute for any questions up to this point. All right. I don't want to keep you too late. Like I said, we're going to probably go late. But if you have anything, just hit it in chat and Paul will, interrupt me at proper times and I can go ahead and respond again as you're going through this. If something just comes to your mind and you say, I'd like to know about that more. All right, templates. One of the things we try to do about templates was say, we're trying to make it so that your employees don't have to know about account numbers or, A500 or A510 or A512 or anything like that, or the, 459. So we try to say, let's keep it, minimal on the levels. So for instance, if you look at state trunk line, you might have 4 or 5, maybe just 3 state trunk line contracts. So instead of doing a level that says state trunk line, then a level that says the contract, and then underneath each of the levels, you have the state trunk line activity that you're doing, one of the four digit, 4 character activities listed. You could easily make that just two levels by saying state trunk line I-75, and then you just have the values, each of the individual items under that for the activity. So it should just be straightforward. Again, so think about ways you can minimize a level if you don't need it. Local roads, a lot of times the local roads will be a local road and then the township and then some kind of a road and then the activity. So again, you could possibly just say, local roads in the township can be together, so that's one level that is constricted. The reason I'm asking that I'm mentioning this is just when you get on a phone and you try to do it, the fewer selections you have to make, the easier and quicker it is to get through entering a time card. As well, then, the next number sort of contradicts the first one is keep the number of selection at each level minimal. So if you do have something which all of a sudden you hit the drop down and there's 85 things for an employee to check, he's not, for a new person, it's really difficult to know. But if he's only got 15 or 12, usually they can suss out what they're supposed to have selected. And, more times than not, at least they're 1 in 12 instead of 1 in, 29, ability to get the right thing, selected on their time card. Also, for the names and what you put for the titles of the time card parts, think about the nomenclature that's used out in the back. The guys might have some shorthand about different roads. So, see if there is some nomenclature that you could just change yours to. Because ultimately, in the time cards, you don't really need to know what they're picking until the end. I mean, it's the final account that comes out in the end, and how they get to that account. Uh, you shouldn't have to be something the clerk needs to maintain. It's something the guys have to figure out, when they're putting in and I use guys and gals. Please don't think I'm sexist. It's just easier to mention it that way. But the idea here is, try to think about ways that can make it easier for your employees to put this information in. And please don't just take the chart of accounts approach where you have 4 levels for everything. That also makes it really difficult to see, because it means all your employees have to kind of know what how the chart of accounts works with 457, and then 497 and 496, and then the whatever number you gave to the township. You know what I'm saying? You get the understanding. It should just be nice, simple words for easy to understand. The thing you need to keep track of in templates is only the final level of that template has the account number. So you can be very creative. You could create, if you really wanted to, just first level account numbers that have the full account number in it if you want. And sometimes you do that for certain things. But again, let's be creative about it. Again, the idea here is the more templates you create, that becomes more time it takes during login and load and reload, because we have to bring all the templates over. So again, be aware that you want to try to keep it restrictive as possible. And then remember, certain groups of employees can be restricted from seeing these templates. So the fact that they exist doesn't mean that everybody sees them. And sometimes when you're creating these, you kind of forget about that. It's like, no, I can't have this out here because the foreman shouldn't be able to, or the employees shouldn't be able to see the foreman's versions of his templates. Well, you can certainly set all that up by using permissions to restrict it. So please be aware, you want to again, try to make sense, try to keep the number of levels, smaller than if you can, and do that. I'll show some examples of what we currently have here, and you can kind of see, but again, this came from a road commission, so this is sort of what they're using now. But I just wanted to talk about this a little bit so that you can think about this, and you can change, you can easily change how you set up your templates. You can, modify that. You can go in and change the names without any deal. You can, if you want to archive the old one and set up a brand new one, you can do that, or make it inactive, I should say. The one thing to note is inactive templates will not get sent across the wire. So we still show the time card that it might have one, but we just say it wasn't the template wasn't found. And that's fine. It doesn't hurt anything. It doesn't break anything. But again, the idea here is we try not to send everything across the wire. We're only trying to send as minimal amount that's required to keep the system going. Permissions, that's another big one because permissions take a lot of thinking about. Every every exception to the table permission requires information to be sent across the wire for the employee. So again, we want to try to minimize it, yet we still want to have control over what the employee sees and what he doesn't see. So you can look at things like here, I have permission for inventory set to none, which means if I want him to see any of the inventory, like maybe he just wants to see road materials, I have to enable every road material, which means I'm going to have to send over information. Now, it's not that much, but again, every little bit of information over the wire means things go slower. So we try to keep that limited. This is why we did this instead of just saying, oh, just send over that you have permission for all the inventory. So we're sending over another 4,000, let's say you have 4,000 inventory items. So we're sending over 4,000 permissions. In which case, here, like equipment, you might have 800 pieces of equipment in the system set up. So instead of sending over 800 permissions that says he has it, we send over one little teeny bit, and now I can see all the equipment at the table level. So again, it radically reduced the amount of permissions we had to send, which radically, increased the performance of the MyWork on the web. But again, there's still some things in here that are you want to think about. One of the things I have here I shouldn't is payroll types. So I really encourage nobody to have permit all on payroll types. You generally don't have hundreds and hundreds of payroll types. You generally only have about if you've gone through the system a while, you might have maybe 20, 25 different payroll types. Most of them aren't being used. So usually I tell people to say permit none and only add the payroll types that they're supposed to be able to utilize in the MyWork system. It's fine because again, you're sending maybe 5 records over at this point for the permit, because most places, again, you don't have that many. Templates, on the other hand, yep, templates is another one where you have to look at that one's a little harder because you got to kind of decide, is it better to permit none and then only grant them access to the ones they can permit, or is it better to permit them all and only deny the ones they shouldn't see? So again, it's a balancing act on templates. It will do, and again, this is per employee. This is not per, the whole system. This is just each employee has their own settings. So some employees, templates might be more important to have everything and then only deny them certain things. And I'll kind of cover some of that here in a little bit to kind of give you an idea what I'm thinking, the thought pattern that Cogitate has, I would say, on how the permissions are set up. But be aware, it's important to kind of think about the table level first to be, what do I want to deal with? Now, if you say permit all, there's a couple of things that, has a nicety. If I add a new piece of equipment, he's already got access to it. I don't have to, enable it. But if I say permit none and I add something new, I'm going to have to come back to his time card or to his permissions and add that. We're trying to provide a cleaner way for the permit none people, but again, we want to make sure that you are aware that right now it's easier to say permit all because you're only denying the ones he shouldn't have access to. Now, let's talk about equipment for a minute. We automatically have certain things that we are not sending across the wire. Like if the equipment is disposed of, it doesn't go across the wire. So they won't ever be able to add anything to a disposed of equipment. It's just not happening. It's been disposed of. It shouldn't be there. Templates, again, if you move a template into the inactive, we don't send the template over the wire. So you've got some control galactically over certain things so that you don't have to keep, setting everybody individually to it. So you can make sure, again, there you're okay on the things that they shouldn't be keying on data and labor towards. Okay, so now let's talk about setting an exception, and this is what I wanted to talk a little bit about. So let's say we have um, this employee here, which is the 20, and they have they're a supervisor for there's a supervisor with a salary. So right now, if I have permit all on my templates, I really don't want him being able to key into the building mate or the engineering salary or the IT. So I'm throwing exceptions on all those because he should only ever see super salary when he goes to when he goes to the 515 admin account to bring it in. Okay. So again, you can do stuff like that so that, while you set the template up with a two-layer template, in a way, I would have set this up as just the high-level template, and I wouldn't have done it this way. I wouldn't have set up a 515. Like I said, the what they're doing here is they're trying to put the account number that it would be in as a way to know it. I would have just said, super salary, and the only one who ever has permission to that is the guys that are supposed to select that. Nobody else would ever even see it. Even though it's at the top level, it's better that way, to do it. It just makes it easier. So he comes in there and he hits a account and he hits drop down when he does his time card and he sees super salary, he selects it and he's out the door. So it isn't that hard. But again, you know, it, there's a lot of ways of skinning a cat with our system. It's just you have to think about it. So spend some time to think about these things instead of making everything available to everybody. All right, supervisors. Let's quickly talk about those. We have supervisors we require now. We have a check at the very beginning to say if a person does not have a primary supervisor, we will stop that employee from entering a time because there's nobody there that's supposed to be approving them. So one of the things that we want to make sure is when you're creating a new employee that a supervisor has been entered so that his time can get approved. Employees that have another thing to think about is, like we said, employees can have many secondary supervisors. We can only have one primary, but many secondaries. So think about setting up maybe a fake employee number that's a supervisor of everybody. So there's a way that somebody can log in as a supervisor and have access to, approve or deny anybody. You generally don't want the clerk to have that as a direct login to theirs, but you could. But again, if there is a employee that is supposed to be this that people can log in, then think about setting that up if you need that in your place because you have a lot of breakup. But you want to make sure that employees have at least one secondary so that if the primary is out on vacation or maybe one of the places the primary person retired and they had all these employees that didn't get because nobody was set to primary again for those employees. So again, let's make sure you have a secondary on everybody. So you can just go through the screens on the supervisor screen and set up to make sure all your employees have somebody set as primary and somebody set as secondary. Yep. Okay. Did I skip a screen? Hang on a second. Let me go back a screen. Yep. Entering a time card. Okay. We added a whole slew of options over the last few years. So I want to, bring everybody up to date to help employees enter time cards quickly and efficiently, especially if they're doing things that are repetitive. We do have a copy a whole day. So, I come in on Tuesday and I did pretty much identical what I did on Monday. I can copy Monday and I'm done. So, just be aware of that. One of the things during the copies we do, I believe we don't copy inventory, but don't quote me on that right now. I'd have to go back and double check it. But when we copy a time card entry, we do copy the inventory on it. So I could say I'm using the same truck, the same attachments, but I'm on a different road, or I'm on, or I'm doing a different activity, but I still have the same truck, radio, blah. So we have the ability to copy, the time card entry that I just entered for a day. So I call it, we should be say task, but so when you put your time card task in, and then you go ahead and you say, oh, I'm going to do another 2 hours. It's not like you went back to the main office and got a new truck with a new radio. Maybe you did, but generally you wouldn't, and that kind of thing. So they can copy their current task to enter that. That just, kind of makes sense, for that. So again, I wanted to, just talk a little bit about some of these things that we did do. We also have group entries. I didn't put that on here. So if they are just entering, we have a group of equipment together, they could, put in and add a group when adding a time card. For the supervisors, when they're doing approvals, we've done some nice things here where we do approvals and denials. There's, why you're doing that is, of course, specific to each time card. So whether you're, why that happening, but when you're doing a denial, we have you put in a reason so that information can get passed down automatically to the employee so they can, of course, fix their time card entries for the day or time card tasks for the day. When you're doing the approval process, try to always start on the first record because the form will automatically update you to the next, when you complete the employee that you're on, the next one will automatically show up. So it just makes it a lot easier. I'm going to show and tell some of this, but I wanted to cover it, in this form first rather than doing a lot of switching between the two because it takes time. We recommend saving. One of the things that we found when you have 30 employees, let's say that you're approving for a day, if you were to take the time to approve all 30 and then hit the save, we've had issues where for whatever reason, the data process to your, again, this portal connection, it timed out because there's too much other activity to it. Or there was, something slowing down on there, and so you had to do them all over again. So we recommend just hitting save after each 10 that you do. That way it limits the amount that gets, pushed over, and so it's more likely that, the approval process will be smoother. It doesn't change where you are in the list. It just boom 10, and then you come back and you can keep going. Supervisors do have the ability to add, remove, or adjust any attachments. So again, if the attachment is the issue, you certainly, unless internally there's a memo that requires you not to do that, but there is that ability in the system to be able to do those things. So you do have that, available. Salaried employee has been a big question. How do I have my salaried employees take advantage of the MyWork? I've seen a lot of creative ideas out there. Some places have just changed their salaries to hourly and made their rate based on the salaried. This is okay. Every way you do it is okay. Some of the things I'm going to mention here will help you maybe think about maybe a different way. But most salaries, we suggest you follow these guidelines. If you set the rate for a salaried employee to be 0, then this way they can do any pay type that's based on rate functionality to put in their time. So like if they need to put in 2 hours to their vacation, they can do that. A salary person can do that in MyWork if their rate is 0 because it won't add any money to their pay. It'll just update their bank for 2 hours, that kind of a thing. So as well as if he's going to be doing activity on an account, if he puts it in as regular, at least you're tracking and you can get the number of hours that he spent on a particular job or a particular activity. And so he can, a salary person can then be putting in all of that detail so that we have a field in there in the employee that's called billable rate. And we can use that billable rate in one of our reports to generate how much dollar amount that you would want to charge somebody for the labor that this salaried person provided on the task at hand. Again, it's just to think about. You don't have to do it, but just let you know that if you do that, then they can simply enter time card and hours that it shouldn't affect anything else because, 2 hours times 0 is still $0 amounts. A pay code should be set up for employees that you're going to do that has the function in there, the amount box is checked on the pay code. And when you do that, then when that employee picks that, when a salary person picks that, they can put in a fixed dollar amount. If you don't want your salary people, keying in their dollar amount they're supposed to put in once a month or once every 2 weeks, then have a PR journal that has just the salaried employees' dollar amounts in it that you can just borrow uh, from the previous payroll cycle and just use that to track, and then use MyWork to just track hours and banks that has to be updated. So all that's in that journal is just their salaried amount. So the employees don't enter their dollar amount for their salaries, but it's still pretty automatic because again, you're just borrowing the journal. So you have, 8, 9 people that are salaried, so they just get the same amount every payroll cycle. So they boom, put that in. And then when you run the payroll calc, it does it. The thing that need to be careful about salaried employees when they're putting stuff in, certain things like have incentive pay that adds a dollar amount to their thing. So that can sometimes cause confusion. So we have incentive equipment. So if they use a piece of equipment or they attach a piece of equipment that has incentive pay, it will increase their rate by a fixed amount, like sometimes 50 cents. So then all of a sudden there would be a 50 cent dollar amount added to their salary when they're not supposed to have it. And also some certain pay types that have fixed rates instead of adjustable rates based on the rate. So again, just be careful about that when they're doing the salary. But other than that, salary employees, can take advantage of MyWork, and you can take advantage of being able to track where the salary person put his energies, especially if you're looking to generate an invoice to bill for the activity of the road commissioner. I'm going to kind of combine these together because we've done this. Import, view time cards, and missing time cards. Pro Fund Accounting can read the time card data, create a payroll journal from the time card data. That's what they do. That's what it is supposed to do. So you will see that. And again, everybody here has ran it in import. It basically just creates a payroll journal. And from there, you can modify that payroll journal. So again, all of this magic doesn't really put anything into the system other than the information to generate a payroll journal from it. We do have a menu item to view time cards. So right from Pro Fund Accounting, you can look at people's time cards and see them. And then we also have a way in that same thing to see time cards that are missing. So you can kind of go and say, oh, for a given day, as a payroll clerk, who's missing a time card? And you can click on it and it will show you all it gives you first a number of how many people are missing it. You can click on that number and it will give you a list of all the employees that have not entered a time card for that day. Now, again, they may have entered that way they haven't even entered a time card. It could just be that the time card for that day is not approved. So again, there's still a little bit of a dice there, but just so you know, that's kind of what we do. Okay, so I'm going to go first on questions and answers for anybody since we're late on time, and then I'm going to go through and show and tell a little bit of some of what I just talked about, but I didn't want to, I'm trying to, make sure we said till 12 o'clock and it's just a little bit after. So I'm going to leave it open for open question. Any question you have about MyWork, feel free to, if you want to unmute your mic and ask it, you can. You don't have to type it.
From Laura, can you set up favorite templates for the most used time cards?
That's an interesting question. I'm trying to understand that one, but most used time cards. So favorite templates. So you don't have to go find the template again. Okay, so my thinking here, Laura, would be this, that I would recommend either a copy from a previous day would be a better answer than trying to set up a favorite for entering new. But possibly that would be like a sort order, maybe setting up a way to have a sort order that would put these at the top of the list. Is that the thought? Something like that. I don't know. I mean, we could look at it. It would have to be per employee, I would think. We can talk about something, maybe, I have some ideas that we could possibly do that you could do now to help it, but you got to be kind of flexible in certain things. But yeah, I mean, we could look at something like that, but certainly, like I said, give us a call and we can investigate it together to see, so I can get exactly what you're kind of looking at and we can, work out something. Well, I'm going to move on, but just keep typing your questions. I will stop, because like I said, all I'm going to be doing is just kind of showing and telling MyWork now. So let's take a peek at MyWork. I know I had it up. There it is. Hey, my session timed out. All right, so we're going to start by logging in as just a regular old Joe. So I have COG 21. He's a regular old Joe. And he comes in, you've seen this day in, day out for anything. I don't need to cover it. They don't have any upcoming events. We show these are the days he's missing. If I come through here, these are days that I don't have a time card in. No, I just did this. I only just updated this for last week, so this is why he's got so many. But usually they would see then, the ability to click in a day so they can kind of see all the time that they've entered. It looks like their supervisor has been sleeping on the job. But let's say they're going to put a new time card in for today. So I'm going to code the time card. I'm going to enter a time card and I'm going to put one in for today. And I have access to these four types of time cards. Now they could have equipment capital outlay and they could have work order. They could have those as well, but we don't have that turned on for this person. So I could say, hey, I'm doing exactly what I did yesterday. So I just want to, sorry, got to go back one. So I just want to copy something from yesterday. So I'm just going to copy yesterday's time card. And boom, here's yesterday. I did the exact same thing or today. Let's just say though, I didn't have this direct equipment, so I'm going to delete that for today. And these hours are incorrect, so I'm going to change that from 5 hours. That's supposed to be 3 hours today because it was a little bit different. So I update my equipment and I save it. So now I got my three, my two. Now I've only got 7 hours in. So, but this one was a little different. So I'm just going to modify this one. And that was 3 hours as well. And I save it. And it's simple as that. And now I've just entered, all of this same information again because it was the exact same thing as yesterday. Again, it didn't take that long if some of the shortcuts. Now to put it all in again from scratch might be a little bit, you know what I'm saying, difficult. But again, we have it. Now, see, I really don't like these templates because I don't like the numbers in front of it. If your guys are used to numbers and that's how they talk in the back, then it's okay. But I'd rather just this say primary road Sioux, to be honest with you, and then traffic signs. That's what I prefer if I was, trying to put together a simple system for employees to enter so that they don't have to know that it's a 467 kind of a thing. Like, state mate, this is a huge length of something. I don't really like that because it's so big. When you get on a cell phone, let's see if I can move into my cell phone emulator here real quick. Yeah. When I get on a cell phone, it's just, it's a lot harder to go through because it's just bigger and big, it's pretty big. But, it's your call. We support it if it's bigger, but again, the idea here is trying to keep it so that it makes sense to the employee quickly and easily, and they don't have to know a lot about how the road commission is functioning to put a time card in. Because on paper, you only had slots. They just chuck in a slot and put it in. They didn't, you know, you get the idea. Anyway, so that's how I put this time card in. So I, put in a brand new time card in, less than a minute, in reality. Now, if I did it all by hand again, if I wanted, like the previous questions, like, certain attachments. So if I come in and let's just say I'm going to add a new entry to today and I try to do the account, I have to go through, I got to go find which one I'm on and, it becomes a list. It's not that bad of a list for the top levels. So let's say I pick local road mate, but then I got to go, boy, I was on a road, but I can't remember exactly what township it was in. So I'm going to do Superior. And what was I doing in Superior? I was doing traffic signal field. No, I wasn't doing any of those. I was doing emergency response. Why not? And then I had in here my group. So yeah, this becomes a lot to have to do this every time. I put in 4 hours and apply. So, here I'm bringing in, what it was, but that's a lot of entry. And if I was doing the same thing yesterday, why don't I just copy from yesterday? I'm just saying, it's still, you can still put this in like this, but it might be easier to not have to do it from yesterday. Okay, let's look at it. So does all the information in blue have to be typed in by the employee, or do they just pick a code? All the information in blue. No, they just pick a code. All that comes from, like I showed you, just the accounts when they put in an account. I'll just edit this one. So that all comes from here. They're just selecting it from here. They're not typing that in. They're just saying, oh, I'm picking North Road and then I'm picking Fill Sand. So if I come back, yeah, shut up. North Road Fill Sand. See, this is makes sense to me. I'm on North Road and I did Fill Sand. That would make sense to me. So if that could be, if you do your primary roads the same way, to say, maybe you say PR Sue, and then you just have traffic signs. So they know, that's your high level is PR Sue, and then traffic signals. So it's two things they pick. They pick PR Sue because they know it's primary, or LR Sue because it's local. Now, knowing the difference between a primary and a local road is important, but do they have to pick all three of those to get you get the idea. That's just I'm just saying think about it. It's not like you have to, just think about it. Okay, and then I have how do you enter a time card if I worked out of class? I am normally a truck driver and today I'm a heavy equipment operator and they get 50 cents more an hour. So if I was doing something like that, when I come into here and let's say I'm adding a new time card, I'm assuming you're going to still be charging, let me see how they say it. Yeah, you're going to be charging it to some account, but your pay type here. So you'd have a pay type that would give you a 50-cent bump that you could select from. So when I'm out of network, I'd have a pay type. I select my 50-cent bump pay time. So that would give me that. And I have my 2 hours, and then it's just hello. Don't press F1. So then I have my 2 hours, and then it's just a matter of what was I doing. So I was an admin for the day doing engineering salary. Why not? It's just what, this is what account number it's charged to. Hit the extra rate button. So if I hit extra rate, all that means is that somebody else has to enter what the extra rate is when they're importing the time card. And so I've advised people to try to make, if it's a fixed thing that everybody knows about, make a fixed pay type that does it for you. It just takes, your rate times that. So let me go in here. Let's see if I can make one real quick. So if I go into payroll pay types, we got a ton in here. So let's find one. What are we thinking? On-call pay, what does that do? Same payroll factor. Well, I tell you what. So I will quickly create a new code. I'll show you how the F5 works as well when you do a refresh. So I'm going to create a new code. We're going to call it, EXT for extra rate, EXT extra rate. I don't care about the check name. There's no type. I don't need to give an account number because it's going to be charged to whatever. And I'm going to put in the 50 cents more that's added to the rate. And then it's taxable and there's no bank that goes with it. So I just saved EXT. So now I have to go into, I'm on, what employee was I on? I think I'm logged into 22, 21. I think I'm logged into 21. So come back here to 21. So I go to employee. Nope, I go to permissions of 21 and I can permit all pay types. So did we throw exceptions on this? Yes, we did. So, but I should see extra rate. I've turned those all off because I've permitted them. So the exception is to turn them off, which is fine. Save that. So I should see it. So if I come in here and I press F5 and I go back to my account number, I should see extra rate. And so now I can put in 2 hours and it will add 50 cents more to my rate when I import it. Instead of having to put in extra, instead of having to select the extra rate and making the payroll clerk when they're importing, put the rate in. Let's go ahead and throw this in here. So I'm going to choose a template. We're going to do primary road and we're going to say Bruce and we're going to say surface mate. And And I didn't have any attachments today, just so we keep it straight. Yeah, I know I went over my amount. Okay, so we have this time card in for today on this person. So I'm going to go ahead and sign out. And the supervisor is going to come in and he's going to look and see today's date. He's got the one from Madeline and he can go ahead and approve it. But I didn't want to show that. Well, we can show that. But we see we have this one in here and there's a note in here that says the extra rate because they're special. So we're going to go ahead and approve. And the person moves into the approved state and then I save that. And so they're approved. I'm going to say I'm finished. But let's go to a date that I'm talking about. It has three people in it. If you start out at the bottom, it isn't as good as when you start out at the top. So if I start out at the top and I'm going to approve, it immediately moves to the next person and gives me the approval. So it makes it a little easier if you do it that way when you're approving time cards. So again, one of the things I want to show is we show when they clock in and clock out if we're using that. So you can say this person did have 10 hours of clocked in time. They are saying they did 10 hours of, work time. So, generally those should equal or be relatively close. Yeah, there was 6 extra minutes, but fine. They had 10 hours of activity. They're saying they did 10 hours of work. So again, we want to make sure but that's all, you have a way to see what they clock in, clock out when you're approving. If I need to see this person's banks, I can go to backup one, I think it's on here. I don't have a bank here. If the time card entry has a bank entry on it, we have it. I don't have any. Do we have any in here? Well, let's just go add one, I suppose. I'll just add one to myself. Okay, my bad. I knew we could do it. So on this day, so if I do a personal, so I do a good old sick time, and I got 1 hour of sick time, and I save it. And when I go to approve myself, because I can approve myself, 6/9, and I go here, there we go. You can see the bank that you're dealing with to see the totals. I knew we had it. Just couldn't remember how to get to it. Okay, so simple enough. But yeah, if you're going to approve it, start at the approval top because it just makes it easier to go through and edit those approvals correctly and quickly. Because if you don't, and then like I said, after 10, do a save so that what you just got done doing doesn't get lost because you have 50 to do and you get down to the bottom and something, somewhere along the way you're pushing a lot of data through on a link that might not have the ability to have a lot of data pushed through quickly. So you want to make sure that you're limiting that. So a lot of smaller pushes is safer than one big push of data because there is a lot of information that gets pushed back to the portal during that process when you hit the save button for each employee. So it's not, unfortunately, it's not a small little thing that we set and change here. All right. So those are the two things I wanted to kind of cover as far as show and tells. We have a lot of other things, we're always improving this. It gets slower and slower because we have other things we're doing as well. So the biggest thing coming up on this is going to be pay types or payroll pay types. Pay stubs, being able to, get a printout and a copy or pay stubs will work almost identical to W-2. So there'll be a consent form that they have to sign because legally they got to sign a consent form unless you force them to do that when they're on a new hire. But we'll have something available that you can turn on. So if they say yes, they want to be able to see their pay stubs online, then you'll be able to see your pay stubs. All right. Do we have any other? Again, the extra rate button there for places that have dynamic rates that need to be added based on some other criteria, but I prefer them just have the ability to select it from a drop-down list of rate additions that would happen. So instead of it just being regular time, this is, regular plus, if you would, or, usually we have when I'm supervisor for 4 hours for that day. So I get a little bump because of that. That's, what I call force supervisor time. So FST, force supervisor time. They can select that then for those 4 hours. And remember, everything still has to get approved by their supervisor before it goes to the payroll clerk. So I usually try to, have people do that. I think that's more friendly in the system than it is. But if you want the payroll clerk to have to key in the new rate, certainly the extra rate will, allow them to do that. Okay, well, I'm going to end it here. If you have any other questions, always you can call us. Simply just give us a ring, but I'll wait for a second to see if anybody has anything they want to put forth right now. Okay, so all we have left is, the next meeting will be happening. So, come to that. Everybody will be things. And thank you for attending. I do appreciate you guys coming and learning about this stuff so that it helps reduce the amount of questions you would have or, times you'd have to call us for things because you may have learned something today. Hopefully you learned something today, but at least you understand, yeah, let's control the bandwidth usage at your road commission to make sure nobody's streaming music or videos during the day.
You are now working smarter with ProFund Accounting. Thanks for watching. Be sure to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more content like this.